In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and joining us now is one of my favorite public policy analysts, great lawyer, great statesman, Congressman James Faso. John was a member of the U.S. Congress, member of the New York State Assembly. John, I'll tell you what troubles me. There's a proposal, it's called Proposition 1, was put on the ballot. It never should have been put on the ballot. It was finessed by the Democratic Party to create an issue, a so-called abortion issue. It's called the Equal Rights Amendment, which is total consumer fraud. And there are real dangers with this if this is passed. This must be stopped, in my humble opinion. Would you please tell our listeners what this is all about?
Well, Judge, great to be with you and Eric and Jesse and your audience today. Yes, Proposition 1 is a true Trojan horse. The legislature and the majority Democrats in the legislature present this to the people this November. It's on your ballot as an equal rights amendment necessary to protect the right to abortion in New York State. Now, regardless of what your position is about the topic of abortion, we all recognize the New York State legislature legalized abortion in 1970. It is not under any threat of repeal or change. And in fact, this so-called Equal Rights Amendment, the word abortion doesn't even appear in the amendment itself. And it does, however, create new categories of protected classes of people in New York State. And here's the danger. The danger is that this will put at risk the viability of women and girls sports. It will seriously compromise parental authority over healthcare decisions for their minor children. It'll create new rights for illegal immigrants and non-citizens in New York State, because one of the features of this amendment there can be no quote-unquote discrimination based upon national origin. And it also has just an absolutely unbelievable provision in it, which would say that programs to reverse discrimination programs to address prior discrimination would now be legal under New York State's Constitution. Now, most people, I'm sad to say, don't even know this is on the ballot. They don't know it's coming. They don't know that this is a massive Trojan horse that is awaiting them on Election Day. I urge everyone, if you don't remember anything else that we say here today, make sure before you finish voting, you turn your ballot over and you vote no on Proposition 1. And Judge, we can go into any of the details about this: parental rights, national origin.
That's fine. But I just want to point out to our audience the significance of making this as part of the Constitution is that it's almost impossible to change it once it's in the Constitution. That's number one. And number two, I tell you, as a former state Supreme Court justice, this will go for interpretation purposes to the bench. A New York Court of Appeals bench, by the way, ultimately, which is controlled by the left wing of the Democratic Party through the legislature. So you're not even going to get an honest read on the constitutionality. They'll interpret this to broaden the rights because it's consistent with what the left wing legislators want. What's your thought on that, John?
You're absolutely correct. The language that's contained in this amendment is filled with vague and undefined terms. Now, let me just give you an example. And this goes to the question of parental rights over the health care decisions for their minor children. this would create a new constitutional right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. And we all know the transgender movement has been very, very vocal in recent years, etc. Many, many young people, especially teenage girls and middle school age girls, have been convinced through social media that, well, maybe I'm really not a girl. Maybe I really want to be a boy. Okay, leave all the questions of gender dysphoria and the psychological issues, leave that aside. This amendment creates a new right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression. And there's no distinction for minors. It applies to all persons. So what will happen, Judge, if this is enacted? A 14 or 15-year-old will go get an advocacy organization like the ACLU or the Human Rights Campaign to represent her or him, and they will go into a court and say, I want to have puberty blockers, or I want to have so-called gender-affirming care, or I want even gender surgery, and my parents won't let me. Because this amendment applies to all persons, as a constitutional right, it will supersede any statutory rights in law that are given to parents to control the health care decisions for their minor children. That's exactly what you were saying, Judge, in terms of how courts will interpret this. And to look at the question of women's and girls' sports, we know that this is a matter of some controversy where biological males are asserting their right to participate on female sports teams in high school and college and elsewhere. And once you create a constitutional right to non-discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression, you can guarantee when this matter winds up in court and the plaintiff says, I'm a transgender person, I'm a biological male, but I consider myself a female. That's my gender identity. That's my gender expression.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe, now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
They are discriminating against me based upon my transgender status and not allowing me to participate on this girls' or women's sports team, and that violates the New York State Constitution. This is precisely how this amendment will be interpreted by many courts and many judges in this state, and that's exactly what the left wing, the progressives, so-called, in the Democratic Party, are seeking. That's what they're doing. In fact, you remember Kamala Harris actually in 2019, when she was first running for president, she answered a questionnaire from the ACLU in California, and she said she supported providing transgender surgeries to inmates, including illegal migrant inmates in California prisons. That's how far an extreme left she is on this topic. But this has now become mainstream among the Democratic Party leadership in our state and across the country. It is not mainstream, Judge, among average rank and file Democrats. They're not aware of their party doing this for the most part. But in actual point of fact, when people in New York State, when they're polled and they're told what the ramifications of this amendment are, they will vote against it. But the question is, and that's why I'm so appreciative of being on the air with you today, because we are giving vital information to your listeners and to the people in New York State as to what the real intent of Proposition 1 is. This is what the sponsors of that amendment intend. And in fact, some say, well, you really are exaggerating. You're raising questions that aren't, that can't possibly be true. Well, just last year, the New York State Department of Education issued a guidance and advisory to all the school districts, 700 school districts in New York State. And what would that guidance said? It said, if a child decides they want to change their gender and be called a different name of a different gender and be treated as the opposite sex in their school, and they don't want you to tell the parents, guess what? The New York State Education Department orders the school districts, they may not tell the parents. And it's outrageous that they would be diminishing and circumventing parental rights.
And make it part of the New York State Constitution. Eric.
But if they wanted an aspirin for their kid, they need the parental approval.
That's right. My wife was a school nurse for 22 years at our local high school, and she'll tell you she couldn't give a Tylenol to a student unless the parent knew and the parent approved and said this was okay. Always had to receive parental consent for any medical treatment or care, even as minor as giving a Tylenol to a child in school. Even that minor thing, you still, as the medical provider, you had to get parental permission. But we know what the advocates are going to do with this amendment if this new constitutional right is enacted.
So what is their response to the point when they you're saying that the reverse discrimination is legal if it's undoing past discrimination. Yeah. What is their response to the point that, well, that's unconstitutional, violates the Fifth and 14th Amendment?
They basically don't give any response. In fact, that part of the proposition, that part of the proposed constitutional amendment, Eric, has gotten very little attention. Professor Bill Jacobson, who's a law professor up at Cornell in Ithaca, New York, he has looked at this and he said, this is an outrageous proposal. So, for instance, consider this. The New York State legislature adopted a law, and they now have a reparations commission, which is considering the question of should we compensate African Americans for slavery. Now, slavery ended in New York State in 1825 or 1826, and obviously, thank you to Abraham Lincoln and the blood of our soldiers, it was ended in this country. And we have constitutional provisions, the 13th and 14th Amendment, that grant equal rights to everyone, and the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The question of reparations, this is a big issue in California. It's going to be a big issue in New York. If adopted, this section of this amendment, which says that reverse discrimination programs could be acceptable to address past discrimination, that could be used to justify the payment of reparations by New York State. It could be used to, under state constitutional theory, leaving aside the federal and whether or not this would fly under federal law. You know the issues in New York City over the specialized high school, like Bronx High School of Science, Stuyvesant, etc. Those admissions are very, very tough, and they're admitted by a test. Many have argued in New York that, well, it's not fair that 50% of the admissions in these selective high schools are going to Asians, that we have to more balance it based on the racial composition of the city as a whole. Well, this amendment could be used to say, well, we need to have quotas for admissions to specialized high schools based upon and the authority that's given us in this new constitutional amendment. And, Eric, it's amazing that they put this thing on the ballot. The New York Democrats put this thing, and Governor Hochul put this on the ballot They didn't have a single hearing. They didn't invite constitutional experts, legal scholars to come before the legislature and tell them, well, how could these terms be construed? What kind of conflict would this create with other longstanding existing laws like parental control over healthcare decisions for their minor children? They never did it. They rushed it through because they said, "Oh, we've got to have a response that we offer the people to the Dobbs decision on abortion." And as I said at the outset, the New York abortion law is not under any threat whatsoever. That would require an act of the legislature, and it's not going to happen. But they are waving the false flag that somehow this is going to protect abortion rights in New York State. And at the same time, they're sneaking through this Trojan horse of all of these other things that the vast majority of people in New York, Democrats included, would oppose if they knew it was out there.
Exactly right. Jesse.
John, first of all, I want to thank you, Republican Chairman Ed Cox, and Conservative Chairman Jerry Kussar, for leading this fight to really, truly educate the voters of this district, because as you called it, Prop 1 is nothing more than a Trojan horse. It's truly a toxic Trojan horse. A lot of these issues here, and I think the more, and us being on the ground, when we talk to voters, you're absolutely right. When you let them know that this proposition would continue to allow, it's protecting young ladies, it's protecting parental rights, it's protecting veterans, citizens of this country, seniors, because this constitutional, this if passed, this Proposition 1, will undermine parental rights, extends constitutional protections to illegal aliens if passed, and truly puts dangers in our society. I don't know any family that wants to see a biological man have free reign to walk into a girl's bathroom. This is what this Proposition 1 does. It allows biological men to use female locker rooms, restrooms, and other facilities. On parental consent, we talked about that ad nauseum, and it's true. I mean, the fact that they are taking the parental consent over minors is unbelievable. But as you've been seeing this too, how is the best for, common sense individuals, New Yorkers? And I will tell you, opposition to this Proposition 1 is universal across party lines. It's Democrats, it's Republicans, it's conservatives, it's moderates, it's independents, because it's not common sense. It seems that it's just the agenda of a fringe extreme group that is in control of Albany right now. But as you go forward, what kind of different ways is a way that we can educate the voters even further as we go through this process to keep boys out of girls' sports and keep boys out of girls' locker rooms?
Yes. Well, Jesse, thank you. And there is there's a ballot proposition committee that has been formed of citizens, and it's bipartisan, multi-partisan, if you will. It's called the Coalition to Protect Kids NY. And I encourage our listeners to go to their website, Coalition to Protect Kids NY, or go to the website of the New York State Republican Committee or the New York State Conservative Party Committee, and you can find more information about this. But the key, and I have to really emphasize this, many people, when they go to vote, they'll vote for president and they'd leave. And they vote for president, maybe they vote for Congress, and then they leave. They don't vote for the candidates running for the state assembly or state assembly on the bottom of the ballot. And they forget to turn their ballot over to consider the propositions. And I can tell you, you will typically, and anyone that's been involved in politics for many years, as all of us have been, know that you'll have a drop-off of 20 to even 30% of the people that go into the polls will not vote on every position because they either don't know or they're not interested. They don't recognize the name. And I'm encouraging everyone this year, and I'm an avid Republican, as you know, but I'm encouraging everyone this year, when you go into the ballot and you vote for president, don't skip anything else. Vote straight down that Republican line and make sure that we elect members of Congress and members of the state legislature, but flip the ballot over, because make sure that you don't forget to vote against Proposition 1 and tell your friends and relatives and neighbors about this. The word of mouth is going to be important. I'm hopeful that there'll be much more media coverage of this, but that's why I'm so grateful to you, Judge, for letting me come on your program today and talk about this important issue with your listeners.
Well, the reason
John,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Jesse.
John, the one thing I want to point out, you described that this amendment went through, was passed without hearings, was passed without any input from any of the experts in this group, except those Albany progressive Democrats. I will remind our listeners that there are a number of laws that have been passed like this, and we're dealing with them. Cashless bail is one of them. When they want to hide something, the Democrats do, they do it behind closed doors. They make sure that no one gets any input. And if they want, and in this case, they want to take your parental rights away. They want to let boys invade your girls' locker rooms and your restrooms, and they want the boys to compete in girls' sports. We need to say no to Prop 1.
Well, let me just say this. If this proposition, God help us, passes, you will not recognize New York State.
Well, there's a reason why New York leads the country in out-migration. This will only accelerate
This
that.
will be...
Put it into hyperdrive.
There's so many bad ideas that come from a progressive left. The progressive left, which is dominated by the Democratic Socialists, and they're not Democrat, they're Socialists, and the Working Families Party. They push this stuff through, and the rest of us have to suffer the consequences. And as Eric just correctly pointed out, there's a reason there's out-migration. The numbers, I think, was 880,000 in the last 4 or 5 years. There's reasons. And one of the top reasons is that people of common sense who want to have a high-quality life and want to have respect for traditional values are fleeing because they can't live under this tyranny of this radical minority. Congressman John Faso, I want to thank you very much for being on Let the Record Show.